In a world where genetic and pharmacological sciences have advanced continuously, a study began to figure out if a person can be scientifically made to love another. The subjects of this study are two young adults. The first is the protagonist, an adopted orphan who works under his guardian, helping her with lab work. The second is a girl named Fluffy, and is the protagonist's sister, not related by blood. Due to this experiment, can the affection they feel for each other be real? Can artificially created love truly be called love? Are anime girls without animal ears really allowed to be named Fluffy? Let's find out as we explore the visual novel known as Tiny Snow. So it's been quite a while since I've read a Chinese visual novel. As you may know, I cover a lot of different visual novels on this channel, and not just Japanese ones. But I've unfortunately terribly neglected the Chinese side of the VN universe. But as luck would have it, one day I came across Tiny Snow. Not to be confused with Snow, Dark Snow, First Snow, Virgin Snow, or yes, the Snow. And today I want to talk to you about it. The story mainly takes place on top of a mountain in a log cabin in the middle of winter. The protagonist decides to seclude himself in this log cabin in the guise of working on a task he was given by the professor, the protagonist's guardian and a researcher of the science of love. Whilst hoping to be alone to process his thoughts, he was unfortunately followed by his sister Fluffy, a college student who lives with the protagonist in the professor's home. Having failed to achieve isolation, the protagonist decides to let Fluffy stay. Between what I said here and in the intro, there isn't much more I can say without spoiling the story due to the short length of this visual novel, so let's just go straight into my thoughts on the story. Tiny Snow is a very interesting visual novel because the tone in the story shifts a lot as the chapters proceed. The first couple of chapters are lighthearted as you are introduced to the characters. The protagonist teaches Fluffy how to make it in the sticks, whilst she does silly things, complains, and shows her over-reliance on her brother. The later chapters are more thought-provoking, questioning the morality behind the human experiment as well as the idea of love. Now I want to make it clear that whilst it sounds like I'm spoiling the heck out of this story with the talk of human experimentation and whatnot, this is all laid out in the Steam page, and I wanted to mention that because I didn't actually read the Steam page when I bought this game. Ooh, cute anime girl for $4. Yep, was my thought process. I don't regret reading it without that knowledge, however, because that element of the story is slowly interwoven into the plot as the chapters progress, so it's easy to follow along even without knowing. Some of these later scenes, however, can drag on with its talks of ethics and morality, specifically the scenes with the professor, to the point where I found myself taking a break in the middle of them to read something else. There are a few times you are given choices in Tiny Snow, but it's a relatively simple structure. The wrong choice will proceed to an ending, and the right choice will continue the story. I hesitate to call the wrong choice ends to be bad ends though, because they are paradoxically happy, at least until you read further in the story. I quite liked the main ending because it concludes things nicely in a way that agrees with the tonal shift of the story. Tiny Snow, if nothing else, had a very specific story it wanted to tell, and it does so without overstaying its welcome. The final unlockable extra story is worth a read too, as it sets several years after the conclusion of the main story and shows the results of Fluffy and the protagonist's study. The visuals in this visual novel are very basic. Fluffy, being the main thing you'll be looking at most of the time, has lots of sprites with variations, as well as the focus of most of the CGs. There are a couple of backgrounds, some with a little animation, but nothing too fancy. There are some sequences where characters talk without sprites for long periods of time, but it is supplemented with voice acting, which I'll talk about in a second. The UI is also extremely basic. But overall, I think the visuals are enough for a short visual novel. This is the first visual novel I have read that had full Chinese voice acting minus the protagonist. As such, I can't give you any critiques for it. I simply don't know Chinese. My only thoughts pertaining to this is that it was neat to hear a language that wasn't Japanese or English in a visual novel for once. The soundtrack is relatively small, so it's common to hear the same couple of tracks repeat chapter after chapter. Some new ones are added in later chapters, and a few more in the extra chapter, but I didn't really find any of them memorable, nor was the visual novel long enough for the lack of soundtracks to be necessarily detrimental, so I guess I'd say the soundtrack is extremely average. If there are one or two errors in the English script of a translated visual novel, I can let it slide. However, there were a decent couple more than that, and they get more frequent the further you read. Most of these errors were just missing letters, but some of them I had to stop and think about what was supposed to be said. It's not unreadable by any means, but it is certainly unfortunate. Tiny Snow is a visual novel with a unique premise. It starts as a gentle tale of two young adults camping out in a wooden hut on a mountain, and ends with questioning the morality of their love and what love even is to begin with. I jumped straight into this visual novel, as blind as I can be without any expectations, but I can soundly say that I was relatively impressed. The visuals may be basic, the soundtrack may be average, and the script could have been edited better. But for a $4 visual novel, you get a thought-provoking story, a cute girl with a decent amount of CGs, and a fully Chinese voice-acted game. I'd say that's pretty worth it. So if you're looking for a short read that isn't your typical romance story, perhaps give Tiny Snow a try. But no, seriously, I swear to God, okay, that giving a girl without animal ears the name Fluffy must be against the Geneva Convention. Is it not?